Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch. Before we get going, here's your obligatory message to make sure you subscribe to this channel. And if you love what we're doing, make sure you hit all the buttons, hit the bell button, hit the alert buttons. And remember, you can support this podcast. You can uh, support us in the link, help us bring you great information, more inspiration about witchcraft and living magically. And don't forget, you can visit me directly and learn more about Cucina, Aurora kitchen witchcraft and food magic and the power of kitchen witchery by visiting me at cucinaaurora.com. Now, without any further ado, I would like to welcome back to the show the amazing, fabulous, fantastic, incredible Amy Blackthorn.
Yay!
Hooray! Amy is a professional intuitive, a best-selling author of Blackthorn's Botanical series, and has appeared on TV and news and print media. She's a witchcraft expert for over 25 years. She's kind of a badass. Super excited to have you back on the show, Amy. Welcome, 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 welcome.
Thank you. I missed your face.
I missed your face too. We're like super good online friends, and then we were in the same place at the same time for like
Five
half a
minutes.
second, right? We were both speaking at Temple Fest, which, for those of you that don't know, it's a really great event hosted by the Temple of Witchcraft. It's like a weekend long retreat. And Amy was the keynote speaker. And I ran into you in the hallway and I was like, oh my God, it's you. Big, big hug. And then I had to go because I had like a book signing happening at the same time as your keynote. And so then I missed you. And then I had a migraine, so I had to leave. So when, but at least I got to hug you.
Yes, hugs are super duper important.
Was it a great, great time? Did you have a great time at that event?
Oh my God, it was so amazing.
Right?
The Not only is it the energy, but it's definitely a different feeling when you know that everybody in the room knows what you're talking about, and you don't have to couch it or stop to explain beginner concepts because everyone's part of the, well, not everyone, but most of the people are there part of the temple. So
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
just talk about magic and witchcraft. The first keynote was about social media magic, and the second keynote was about sacred plant magic. And it was really lovely to get to hang out with these people. I was one of their honored guests last year,
Yeah.
and so it was great being able to see people I met last year and
Yeah.
come back to really dive in deep with some lovely few folks at Temple Fest.
I think that event is so fantastic. We're recording this in October. It's going to air in December. And I just came off of a weekend where I was at a really great one-day event called Celebrate Samhain.
Ooh,
And it's a great event that happens here in Southern New Hampshire. And even just these little one-day events are so fantastic, but to get to spend Temple Fest is it's a weekend long, and you could stay overnight and like share meals with people, and you can really commune with community, right? Like really be like steeped in your magic for a whole weekend. And I just think it's just an amazing thing. And I'm here in New England and I get to be part of all of that. And I don't think there is anything quite like it. I've heard that there's stuff in California. I haven't made it out there for these types of event there. Have you been out there? Because you've been speaking on witchcraft forever.
ever. It's a totally different vibe. It's worlds apart. Like I was just in Seabrook, New Hampshire last week.
Right.
Um, so I had never been to Seabrook. I've only been to New Hampshire twice. I I dropped my stuff at the Holiday Inn Express. I have been driving for almost 8 hours.
You drove?
I drove. I do all the drives.
Oh,
So my body hadn't been really moved in about 8 hours. So I grab my gym bag and I go to Planet Fitness. And then when I'm Googling, it says there's three in the area. I'm like, okay,
right.
I'm gonna find one. I'm gonna go. It's gonna be great. I did not go to the one closest to my hotel. I went to a little bit further away in Amesbury and went to something that was closer to the food that I was looking at. I'm like, this
Yeah.
is fine. I'll get a food, I'll get some, I'll move my body, it'll be great.
Right.
And so I walk in, I sit down on the first piece of equipment, and in walks somebody from the Temple of
Is
Witchcraft.
that hilarious?
I I almost, it was amazing. Like, this wasn't even the one that I was planning on going to. I've never been to this town. I've been to this state like 5 minutes,
Right?
and so I already ran into somebody from the Temple of Witchcraft that
Yep.
I knew.
Yep. We're everywhere. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. I'll be like, so where my base is located, my Cucina Aurora base is in Salem, New Hampshire, which is literally 5 minutes from the temple. Like I'm one turn away from the temple itself. And then where I live in Derry, New Hampshire is actually up the road from where they have their large public rituals. So like I never have an excuse to not go. Like I don't ever have an excuse. And people will be like, "Oh, you're like I will say the muggles will be like, "Oh, your business is in Salem where you're some kind of witch." And I'm like, "Yep. Yes, I am." And there's a lot more of us in Southern New Hampshire than there are in Salem, Massachusetts. So just be aware. Like if you really want to come to the witchy place, New Hampshire is where it's at.
You are not wrong. There are so many really amazing, lovely humans. I was in town for Witches Night Out, which is,
Yes.
so the whole town shows up dressed as witches. I was expecting a witchy crowd, and
No.
that was a different witchy crowd.
Yes, so much fun. Oh my goodness, you must have had a blast. And I'm a little bit like writing a love note to autumn in New England this year because the foliage is just outstanding. And I feel like there is something extra magical at this time of year for our community. I don't know. I don't know if it's just me. And again, this ties into your work with plants, right? Like I want to be outside with plants, with nature, with trees from, you know, September when the first leaf changes to when the first snow flake falls. I want to be there, right? Like is there meat on that bone?
There absolutely is.
Right. So
I
what's your interpretation?
I actually took the Palisades Parkway back
Oh, so beautiful.
just to revel in the magic of the leaves changing,
Yeah.
because it's, we don't get an opportunity in our culture as Americans to really make peace with death.
Mm,
There are billion-dollar industries that make us, that are ready, willing, and able to tell us, like, don't think about that. Other
yep.
people can worry about that later. That's not your problem.
Right.
And it gives us the opportunity to really connect with the energy of Samhain and say, loss is not permanent. Those leaves will be back in the spring. The people that we love, who we miss and we care for, can come back to us in another way, in another spirit, manifestation, but it doesn't mean that they're gone.
Mm,
It's okay. It will be okay. Grief isn't permanent. Life isn't permanent. Our beautiful meat suits that carry our spirit around for a few years aren't permanent,
that's right.
and that's okay.
That's right. And so in the fall, if we're aware and we're paying attention, we are experiencing that. We're sitting in those feelings as we're watching the leaves change and as we're, experiencing them falling off. And it's funny this morning, there's a window right next to my bed, right? So I sleep on the side of the bed that's right next to the window. And there's this beautiful maple tree. And it's always the first one to turn. And it's always the first one for the leaves to fall. And my husband, Justin, who did you meet him in those 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Yeah. He looks out, I look out the window. He looks out the window this morning and he goes, "Look at all your plants." And I said, "What are they doing?" And he goes, "They're going to sleep." And I
Oh,
thought, oh, it's so beautiful. They are, and it's so peaceful. And I want to be near them. And then to your point about grief, my father passed away 11 years ago, just 2 days ago. So, like, his anniversary of his death was just a couple of days ago. And one of the things that I remember about the day he passed was being in the hospital on the 17th floor of the hospital and looking out at all the different color leaves and going, things are changing and it's okay. This is a transitional period, just like autumn is a transitional period.
Absolutely.
Wow. I never really thought about it as to why we're so drawn to specifically this season in that way as witches. Can you give us a little bit more of an example of the way we could work with the season in that way?
My favorite is to work with a specific plant on my land, but you may not have a favorite yet, and that's okay. Um, I know that this time of year, my Vitex, my chase tree berries, are going to go from full and luscious and beautiful to naked in a half a second. The minute the first frost hits, it drops every single leaf in a minute because it's from Croatia and it wants to preserve its intake. So the minute there's a frost, it just goes poof, and they disappear on the wind. And so rather than changing a whole lot of their colors, they just vanish. So I
Wow.
always make sure to pick one leaf that's still living and bring it into my kitchen to have it at the kitchen altar for the rest of the season until the next season when they start coming back, because it's one of the last to start leafing in the spring because it needs those warmer temperatures.
Wow.
So I carry that bit of spring into the house to make sure that it's nurtured and cared for in that space until spring is here and I have a new leaf to replace it with.
Oh, I love that so much. So I have to thank you because I credit you with a deeper understanding of the earth that I get to live on in my yard. The first time you and I met over this podcast, we were talking about your protection magic book
Mhm.
and plants for protection, and I had casually mentioned that my entire yard is bordered in poison ivy and um what is the pokeberry,
Uh-huh.
right? And you
Poke.
were like, "Oh, that's all like, protection magic and those are all like, bordering your property." And so since then I've been very aware of the protection magic around my exact rectangle piece of property, right? And what's crazy is this past spring was the very first time I've ever noticed this. It appeared out of nowhere, a giant thistle plant. Right? Did I manifest that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I mean, thistles obviously, if thistle magic is the same as artichoke magic, because
Right.
artichokes are just thistles, giant thistles, right? And maybe you can speak to this. Artichokes are all about drawing healthy boundaries, right? So I don't know,
Absolutely.
is that the same energy of thistle?
It's one is drawing the boundary, the other is defending the boundary.
Mm,
So thistle is Scotland's national flower.
yes.
You know why?
I don't know why. I don't know why. I
Oh my
don't know why. And
goodness,
I'm married
yes.
to a Scot, so I should know.
You should definitely know
I
this.
should definitely know this.
So the thistle became a symbol of protection and vigilance after the Scottish army defeated Norse invaders with the use of thistle, because they were bordering their camp with the thistle they had cleared to make the camp safe, So the Norse invaders are coming over with bare feet, tippy 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 toe, and
Owie.
the sound of someone stepping on a thistle was allow them to wake up, defeat their attempt to sneak up on the Scots, and they were able to, in the heat of battle, make sure they were victorious all through the use of thistle. So thistle is a defensive protection magic, whereas um, something like poison ivy or raspberry leaves, wine berries are defensive. That offensive magic. Think of um, they're both very Mars energy because of that thorn,
Mm-hmm.
but the way that thistle really talks about, I'm staying right here. I'm going to be present. If you're going to come into my space, I'm going to make sure that you pay for it in blood.
Mm. Mm-hmm. I like that
It's
very
beautiful.
much, and they just showed up. I was in the
Yes.
backyard, I was sitting on the patio, and I was like, "What are those purple flowers? I didn't plant any purple flowers. What the fuck is that plant?" My yard is very big, so, like, you can't really see the detail, you just saw these little purple nubs, right? And I walk over and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is a fully formed gigantic thistle bush." Like, it's been there for years, and I've never noticed it. I've lived in this house 8 years. So, I don't know where it came from, and
Yeah.
I sat with this thistle bush, and I watched as all these beautiful songbirds, specifically the finches, came and pulled the I don't know what you call the inside bit when it the fluffy piece.
Mhm.
You know what I'm talking I'm sure you have a real term for the fluffy part. And they were pulling out these little seed pods and eating them and flying away with them. And I sat with this in kind of a meditative space thinking and pondering on it and going, to be that light and that careful and that carefree that you could come dip in and out and take what nurtures you and not get hurt. I thought was a beautiful message and this gorgeous dance that was happening between the bird and the thistle plant.
Absolutely. It's such a delicate dance because thistle is one of those finch's favorite foods. And by allowing it to grow to maturity in the fall allows them to have that food source that they've been looking for. When in some places it's illegal to allow a thistle to bloom because it's a noxious plant that's invasive. So where are those finches going to find food if we don't have a space set aside for them to find that thistle, or find the food that they need? Where are they going to find food?
Is that something you find in your work with plants to be very difficult, very frustrating that kind of like society laws have come in and said, this plant isn't safe and so we're not allowing it, or this plant is, as you said, invasive, and so it has to be removed from its native areas just to make people comfortable. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about that in your opinion and then in your magical work?
Absolutely. So when we talk about this, the word weed gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
It's my job as a horticulturalist to remind people that a weed is only anything that grows somewhere you didn't intend it to. We are the weeds. If we want to go with the normal society that everyone tries to be a part of, it's white Christian nationalism.
Mm,
That's not my jam. If that works for somebody else, like happy for them, like I'll be over here doing my own
mhm.
thing. What we need is weeds. What we need is people who are going to bloom where they are and not where they're planted. The life that I live is not something my parents could have envisioned for me because they didn't know anything about the things that are important to me when I was a kid. So if I lived out the plan that they had for me, my life would look much different.
Same, same.
Yes. The magic that we're finding is that when you look at the plants that really want to be here, the weeds, it's the plants that are tempestuous and boisterous and provide something for the ground in which they are planted. The the mulberries will give you fruit in about probably 6 years. Those grapevines that are taking over your bushes are going to give you food in probably 8 years.
Mm.
But just because the HOA doesn't like them doesn't mean that they don't have value. Roses
Mm.
grow where they're not supposed to all the time. That doesn't mean they don't have beauty and purpose and value. You can have flower petals for rosaries. You can have rose hips for your tea. Lovely source of vitamin C. But if all we see is what we're supposed to and allowed to, what a sad life is that?
Right? And what a great lesson to learn from the natural world, because we do tend to live in these manicured uh places. And and I think we're all a little bit like, I take responsibility. I have a really nice patio, and I had some folks come in and landscape it for me, because I was like, this is out of my realm of my capability of what I can physically do. But I did not touch this backwooded area. I did not touch, and I was like, everything that's going in needs to be native. And I don't want it to be, I want it to be stuff that I don't have to tend to. I don't want to have to trim shrubs or whatever. It all needs to be native, and it needs to just grow. And I don't weed the garden, and I just leave it, well, a little bit, a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I do pluck out some of the crabgrass and stuff like that that gets a little crazy. Give it a little trim, give it a little
Yes.
trim, you
Yes.
know. But in doing this, we see so much more life.
Yeah.
And when native things and when natural things are allowed to grow and, as you say, bloom where they're planted, the way this has, and using even just my little tiny garden as an allegory for the world, which I never thought to do before, Amy, um, how it affects the world around it is incredible. The pollinators, the birds, the wildlife that has shown up in my little piece of heaven. Um, it's really amazing. And I think as people, if we do the same thing and we're comfortable and full of life, to your point, we're going to see that reflect in our world.
And it gives you a sense of ownership that not many other things does, because when we are able to look at the communication that's offered to us from our plant allies, it really tells you that this is something that belongs to you. You're the caretaker of it, not the ruler over it.
Mm.
I grew up in a very expansive a town that was actually named for a breed of cows. That's how agricultural it is.
Wow.
And you see these vast expanses of nothing, and it's like, oh, that's really beautiful, but it's not in my purview in my world, because there's one breed of corn, there's
Mm,
one breed of cow, there's no trees, there's
mm,
no nature or wild to speak of, there's nothing to talk back to you.
mm,
So you could always tell the farms that were started by Christians and the farms that were started by heathens or pagans, in the old sense of the word, where it was just someone who was unchurched, because the natural farms would have stands of trees. They'd have lines of something, as opposed to the farms that were started by Christian families who had that dominionist view of, this is mine and I'm going to use it. Anybody who's heard me talk, no, I hate that word use. It just feels very taker culture. This is mine and
mm,
I'm going to have it and use it because I can. No one can
mhm,
stop me. And it's like, you can't have a two-way conversation if you're the only one speaking.
mm,
So when you're walking out your front door and you see plants blooming that you did not specifically plant, that are growing, that are thriving because of your space, it really adds to that sense of ownership that says, I am the caretaker of this land for however long that I'm here. And it's not about my needs or wants. It's about working in community, working in concert with these allies,
mhm.
with these spirits, because we're all occupying the same space. It's not their job to serve me. This is a community we're building.
I think this is such an important point. And in my work as a kitchen witch, one of the things that I really focus on and teach and talk about, especially right now, kind of, this is the deeper connection with food is sort of the path that I'm on. And I've just gotten, like, I've just told you, I've just had 2 classes this weekend, so my brain is freshly firing. But most food is plants,
Mhm.
right? And the food that isn't plants eats plants. right? So it all comes back to earth, right?
Yeah,
And we
absolutely.
are so disconnected from plants, earth, how food is grown, the cycle of growth and harvest and consumption and gratitude. Like, where the fuck did that go? And
Yeah,
here you talk about growing up in these places where there's just a field of one type of corn.
yeah,
There's a field where only these one particular cows are, you know, living. Like, and if the cows are in the field, you're already better than most places,
yeah.
like, right? So talk to us a little bit about the disconnection and how do we regain connection to these plants? Like, what do you suggest? How do we reconnect?
The very first thing that I always have to remind people is that monocultures do not exist in nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can't have your expression of a living, breathing spiritual practice with a monoculture. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that
take the
so much.
time, if you take the time to experience life, and I mean really experience. I'm not saying you have to go and find a farm and catch a baby goat, but
No.
you have if you're going to get to the point of experiencing life, there's going to be a different way to do that in your specific biome. If you're living in New York City, there's going to be plants that are reaching out to connect with you in the planters outside a hotel, or the trees that are waiting where outside where you're waiting for your Uber. The the Ficus benjamina sitting in the corner of your office. There are plants that are reaching out for you that are really want to have that connection. But we have to give ourselves permission to slow down enough to notice, because one of the things that we do as a culture, not just as people, is we want to discount the daily as not magical because we see it
Right.
every day.
Yes.
It's like, just because you see it every day doesn't mean it's not magical. Doesn't mean it can't be magical. Oh, I eat every day.
Yes.
Food is magic.
Exactly.
Like, listen up.
Right.
You have to
Exactly.
step outside that mindset that says only things that are novel, are magical, and that's not the case at all. If we do that to ourselves as witches, we're just living from full moon to full moon, and that's no way to live.
100% agree. 100% agree. And even with that, we are magical beings, right? We are not, witchcraft isn't something we do, it's something that we are,
Are
right? It's how we navigate the world, it's how we see the world, it's the basis of our belief in self and our relationship to nature, spirit, other humans, animals, like everything. It cannot be discounted. And I agree with you 150 million%. It is these tiny little moments.
yes,
The fact that even just if we broke it down to, hey, my lungs are working, that's fucking magic. You know
that's
what?
fucking magic.
That's fucking, because the truth is, for me, that gratitude of, okay, I am alive. What does alive mean? It means my lungs are working today. My eyes are working. My brain is working. My body's working. I can digest. Oh, I can digest food. Where does food come from? Food comes from earth. This is how we stay connected. And
Yes,
I don't think that those everyday things, as you said to your point, if I see it every day, it's not novel and therefore isn't magical. The opposite is true.
opposite.
Right? The opposite is true. You work in spaces of plant magic, protection magic, these things that are intrinsic in every minute of, look around your home, people. Everything in your home is from nature. There's, do you see this in this video? There's a wooden hutch behind me. That used to be trees. It's real wood. It's real wood. That's plants, people. Like, that's the whole fucking point, is it's everywhere, every time, all the time.
my desk, my writing space is set up like a perfumer's organ. So I'm surrounded with actual plants, even though they're in little bottles.
Right.
The soul of those plants exists in my space right this minute. And it's not any more or less novel because I experience it every day. So when people tell me I don't know any plants, I can't be a green witch, I don't grow all my plants, I don't really know any plants. It's like, do you cook? Well, yeah. My love, then you have a whole cabinet full of plants that you know.
Right. Right. Do you eat a salad? Like,
Do you cook
like,
with garlic and onion,
correct.
green
Correct.
pepper? Like, come on.
Yeah.
These are plants.
Yes, these are plants. Okay, so on that note, I want to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors because I want to dive deep into your new book, which is Sacred Plant Magic. We have so much ground to cover and like 30 minutes to cover it. So let's take a quick break, hear from our amazing sponsors, and then we'll be right back with Amy Blackthorn. We're back with the amazing Amy Blackthorn, and we're about to dive super deep into your new book, which is Sacred Plant Magic. So before the break, we were talking about how we all experience plants every single damn day because we eat food and we live in the world. Like we live in the world. Like it's that simple. If you drink coffee, plants, and just the coffee beans are from yeah, because I'm drinking coffee right now.
Chocolate, one of my favorite herbs.
Chocolate, plant, you know. So first of all, tell us how Sacred Plant Magic is different from your Botanicals series, because that series has won awards and it's the basis of so much of the witch that you've become, right?
Yes.
So and it's really, I mean, transformative for so many people. So how is this book different for people that know you? How is that different?
This is a deeper dive into the world of plant magic. There's each chapter in this book is a completely separate part of that journey.
Mm,
So we can do divination with plants through these beautiful bottles of essential oils that I have access to. When I was writing Botanical Magic, I actually have a little cedar chest full of 2 milliliter bottles of all the perfumes that I blended for Botanical Magic. So they're little beanie 2 milliliter bottles, and the whole box just smells amazing because it's cedar and it's perfumed with all the different ritual oils that I've made.
wow.
So it's taking the ideas of our connections with plants that we built in Botanical Magic and really looking at how they affect us and how we can affect them in Sacred Plant Magic. So it's a way of taking individual plants and developing relationships with them just the way you do with your best friends. You're looking at the idea of plants as beings with agency. It's not just stuff that you have sitting on the shelf. These are plant spirits that have agency, that want to help you, that want to work with you. And we take it another step further by finding individual ways that really benefit our individual practices by developing those relationships. So we can develop plant spirit relationships. We can build those into botanical relationships. So we're taking the idea of the rosemary plant in the backyard and getting to know them as a person or as a being with agency. And we can translate that into the overarching spirit of rosemary and getting to know that spirit. So these are two different beings. The rosemary in your backyard is the Catholic friend down the street, and the overarching spirit of rosemary would be the Pope. They both have
Mm,
similar ideas about how things work because they're both the same plant. They're going to have the same magical correspondences,
mhm.
but they're going to have different ideas as to how to get things done because the rosemary plant in your yard knows you. If I write a letter to my neighbor down the street, I'm more likely to get a response because we have a building relationship.
Right.
Whereas if I reach out to the Pope, he might, make a sign of the cross and high five, but he's not going to show up at my door for dinner on Sunday.
Right. Right.
So we're developing two separate relationships by really extending that past the need for physical plant material in our space. And once you can do that, you get the opportunity to work with plants outside your biome, outside your continent, and outside your epic. Plants
Explain what
have,
you mean by that.
yes, the plants that don't exist on the continent of North America, I can work with. But once we remove the need for physical plant material, we can work with plants that have been extinct for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
As
Mm-hmm.
long as there's a picture of it, if as long as someone knows what it is, somebody knows how it works, like that plant spirit is still out there reaching out for a connection with someone. And we see this in our daily lives right now. If you go
Wow.
to Lowe's in the spring and you're looking through the racks and racks of plants that they have available to them, you're going to come across something that looks a lot like a strawberry, but it's not. See, oh my goodness, this has a white fruit with bright red seeds. It's almost like the nega strawberry.
Yes. Yes.
This beautiful. What is this? And it turns out that those seeds were found probably 10 years ago now in a an archaeological dig that was about 35,000 years old. And so they found these seeds in a jar that was sealed against the elements, and they said, we're going to see if we can germinate these. We're going to see if they'll grow. And not only did they grow, but they grew so well that we're actually able to sell them on our agricultural market right now. This is the predecessor to strawberry. This
Right.
is what strawberries were, 35,000 years ago.
Right.
So this plant is its own ancestor. This plant
Wow.
is bridging the gap between cultural understanding of agriculture 35,000 years ago and what it is today.
Wow.
So it doesn't taste like a strawberry. It does, has this beautiful white flesh and these red seeds. It tastes more like a pineapple than it does a strawberry. It's
Wow.
got a bright, astringent, fruity flavor that really brings those senses forward, but it's not what, if you're expecting to grow a strawberry, that's not it. Like, miss me with that. Um, but those plants have been brought back from the dead through germination and science and allowing us to really experiment with what we're doing. In 2020, there's a plant called Silphium that was thought extinct. It was extinct as far as we know, because it was amazing and incredible. It made food taste better. It made sex more pleasurable. It was an abortifacient, so you didn't have to be pregnant if you didn't want to be pregnant. Like, the plant did all of these really amazing things, so much so that we ate it into extinction. The very last plant that was known to be on the planet Earth was fed to Nero on a golden platter. They're like,
Wow.
hey, here you go, knock yourself out. We're just going to watch over here. It was so important to the agriculture that it's on the money from this time period because it was so vitally important. And in 2020, someone was able to find a specimen of Silphium 150 miles from the last place it was seen 1,500 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So the taxonomy checks out. They're really looking into how this is created. Now they're going to start trying to breed and grow this plant so that we can study it for all of the medicinal properties that were attributed to in Roman times.
And don't we just love the spaces? I love the spaces where science and magic meet, right?
Yes.
So we're talking here about archaeology, digging up this stuff, scientists looking at these old, ancient plant specimens and seeds and taking them to a lab and figuring out how do we revive, regerminate, how do we grow this? Can we grow this on a larger scale? Like, that's all science. And then we get into the spiritual part of that and go, okay, well, now that this is here, now we're able to understand it more. We're able to work with that plant spirit. We were able to work with it when it didn't exist in this plane of reality, but now it is in this plane of reality. So we can do more potent magics with these plants. I think that's fucking outstanding. On the food side, because those are the spaces I work in, how do you feel about the fact that most of the foods, fruits, and vegetables that we consume today have been bred for taste, color, texture? There's really, like, to your point, you had this non-strawberry strawberry. That's the great, 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 great granddaddy of strawberries. And now today, what we have as a strawberry, even if you're buying something locally grown organic from your local farmer or planting in your backyard, it's so far removed from what that was because human beings wanted red and sweet. Do we lose any of the magical potency or any of the energetic qualities as we, as human beings, use science to create these fruits, vegetables, plants, herbs, the oak tree that has been germinated by science to be super duper big and beautiful? How do we feel about all that?
When we take the science out of plants and we take the magic out of plants and we're just left with this plant, the plant's job is to grow, produce a flower that can be pollinated so it can make more flowers later.
Yep.
That's it, pure and simple. We are lucky enough that we've found some plants that are edible and tasty and magical and really brought that forward. But people are being fed, and fed is best.
Mm.
So I love the fact that people are getting more involved with the idea of plants so they can cross pollinate and really create plants that are a lot more drought tolerant. They're able to grow in harsher conditions, so we're able to feed more people. But people act as though this is new technology
Mm.
while they're eating a carrot or they're eating
Mhm.
an orange. These plants have been crossbred and cross-pollinated and manipulated to pollinate with plants that are slightly different from themselves for thousands of years. As long as we've had people, and the minute we stopped being nomadic and we started uh, working with cows and having our farms and
Mhm.
started agriculture,
Mhm.
we've been crossbreeding those plants. We've been creating something new because it benefited us as people.
Yeah, we use our big brains to make it better.
We did.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're not going to find some plants in your magical text. You're not going to find there's going to be plants that aren't in Blackthorn's botanical magic. There's going to be plants that aren't in sacred plant magic. So how do we know what they are useful for in our magical practice?
Mm.
Look at the parents of those plants and see what they're doing. There's going to be a roadmap that tells us what they're going to be most suited to.
Mhm.
Because when you look at the family that that botanical comes from, there's going to be familial resemblances in the
Yeah.
magic that happens for that family. So the mint family is very mercurial, it's very air oriented. So they're lavender is great for secrets, while sage is good for clearing the air. They're going to have family resemblance in the magic that they offer us. So if you can figure out what magical family, which
Mhm.
plant family is part of, you
Mhm.
can go to the head of that family and say, "Hey, I need help with this one thing. Help me out. Help me figure out how to make that happen." Say you're allergic to apples, but you really want to do some magic with that family. You can look to uh, blackthorn sloe. You can look
Mhm.
to pears or apricots. Anything within that plant
Mhm.
family will
Mhm.
have similar magic to it. And
Mhm.
conversely, if you're allergic to it, what can we learn as people with bodies from that allergy? You can
Yep.
meet that plant spirit in your inner landscape rather than risk working with the plant material itself that's causing an allergy, and say, what can we learn from each other? What am I supposed to learn from being allergic to peanuts? What can I offer you as the spirit of peanut that I'm allergic to? How can we cooperate as energetic beings with agency? Um,
So important. So important. I myself struggle with crazy ass food allergies, and it's been a challenge in my life, in my physical world, and in my witchcraft, specifically because I'm a kitchen witch, to be able to still find energetic things that are the same as wheat. Okay, right? That I can consume. How do I work with them? And I often work with wheat or bread magic in an ethereal way and not in a physical way. And what can I learn? Like you said, what's that relationship and what's the meaning of the wheat? And how does that translate into who I am as a person and a witch? And how do I work with that energy, which is really interesting how plant magic can teach us about interpersonal communications and about our own spiritual practices, right? Like you said, to your point, when we listen, when we pay attention, when we're aware of what's out there, and what families these things come from. It's just freaking brilliant, Amy. Tell me, what are for people that are maybe not familiar with plant magic, as we said
Mhm.
before, like, oh, well, if you eat food, you're familiar with plant magic. Right? But if you ever made a vegetable soup, but what are three plants that someone new to the more structured plant magic, three plants that people should or witches should know about and how to work with?
The top three would be the first three plants you interact with on a daily basis. Coffee,
Huh.
cinnamon, whatever's listing in your individual space.
Huh.
So garlic, onion. If you cook, great. If you're still eating food, so the restaurants you're not necessarily cooking out of, they're going to use fresh herbs. They're going to use fresh tastes and flavors
Mm-hmm.
because the first relationships that we build are the ones that have the most bright pathways in our brain, the things that we encounter most often. So
Huh.
your body is reaching out for these plants just as those plants are reaching out to form connections with you. So if you're obsessed with frankincense perfumes this month, your brain and your body are reaching out for a connection with frankincense. If you are obsessed with cardamom in your baked goods, guess
Mm,
what? Cardamom is reaching out for you. It's a divination as well as a messaging service.
yes.
Your body and your heart, your brain are all working together to say, this is what we're needing right this minute.
Mm-hmm.
So please pay attention to that because each of these spirits has something to offer you as a magical practitioner and as a person who eats food.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my work as well as yours, like that plant is trying to tell you something.
Yes.
It's trying to get in touch with your spirit, and your spirit is trying to connect with that. You're not just crazy because you're craving pumpkin, like, okay, again, we're recording this in October. What's everybody craving and why? Like,
Yeah.
think about that. Like, even commercial establishments like Starbucks, again, back to coffee, even commercial establishments like coffee know that humans are craving cinnamon, clove, spice, pumpkin. These are the things that at this time of year, we're all like, ooh, prosperity, home, grounding, protection. We're nesting for the months ahead. Like, these are all the things that are associated with that. And our bodies and our spirits know. So listen, right?
Absolutely. Please give yourself the luxury of listening to your body, to your heart, your spirit, your soul. Um, Go through the spice cabinet in the kitchen, open up each jar and smell what you're working with. Take
Mm,
a notepad and a pen and write down whatever thoughts immediately come to mind. Um, the example that I use frequently is benzoin is a beautiful oil. It's not an essential oil. It's processed with alcohol rather than individual evaporation and distillation. But it gets used in food, in desserts, in commercial applications for cleaning agents. Like it gets used in so many different things. But the minute I smell it, all I smell is snowballs with my mom when I was a kid because they they used that benzoin to flavor the egg custard snowball flavoring. And so my mind is immediately translated back to, probably 10 years old in the summer and walking to the local library and stopping at the snowball stand after with my little books clutched in my hands. Those are the things that are going to drive your magic. It's not just about the plant, it's about the experience that you have had and the memories that it conjures up when you smell that plant. That's going to drive your magic. If you smell nutmeg and you get goosebumps, or you smell cilantro and you get you gag a little, whatever it
whatever
is,
it is.
it's going to drive your magic in whatever way your body is personally responding to it. Because if it's something that you don't like, you're not going to reach for it. You're not going to get the magical association out of it that you probably could if you didn't have the cilantro soap gene. So
That's
pay attention
amazing.
to your own experiences.
Right.
I could talk about this all day and all night, but unless this is a plant that you want to work with, you're not gonna reach for it. You're not gonna have the connection with it that I do or that someone else does. And that's okay, because our own personal experience is what's driving that magical connection. Um,
Right.
our
Right.
our experience with scent. Every day you're given a piece of paper and we're gonna write down everything you smell on that piece of paper every day. Every day you get a new piece of paper, you put it in the office box, and you move on to the next day. So the last time I smelled nutmeg, I'm going to go through that box and find the most recent time that I smelled nutmeg. I'm not going to dump out the box, start at day one as an infant, and say, did I smell nutmeg today? Because those pathways are the best and brightest for remembering those smells. So you have to go through memory to get to recognition every single time you smell something.
Wow.
Our brains are saying, is this a danger to me? Okay, it
Right.
is. We're not going to smell this again. Put that off to the side.
Right.
So I'm getting goosebumps. So when you're going through your spice cabinet and saying, okay, I smelled garlic, I smelled onion, I smelled nutmeg, I smelled clove or cardamom, write down those associations that happen because they are going to drive your magic. If it
Hmm.
smells warm and comforting to have nutmeg and cardamom in your space, beautiful, perfect. Work with
Right.
that. Drive your protection magic with comfort and love and support from the people who love you and would do anything for you.
Yes.
But do not force yourself to work with a plant that makes your skin crawl because some book said that this is good for protection magic. Because
Right.
guess what? If your skin is crawling because you smelled this plant, it's not the plant for you, and that's okay.
Right. 100%. And I think that's, thank you for that point, because I think oftentimes people say, this is this thing for that thing.
Mhm.
Right. You want protection magic and you must have garlic. And then you get somebody who's like, I can't eat garlic. Well, what do I do? Oh, sorry, you're out of luck. Like, that's not the case. Our spiritual practices and our witchcraft is individual to us. And I want to thank you for that, because you have just given everyone permission to say, this is what works for me. And that is the beauty of being a witch, of being a pagan, is being able to say, this is my own personal practice and this is what works for me. Maybe I fucking hate cilantro and I don't want to use it. Oh, but I could use parsley instead. Right. And they're going to have those similar magical properties to them because they're in that same family. And now we've found that workaround. And what are we drawn to? And we cannot deny that if there are plants that want to work with us, then there are plants that don't want to work with us.
Yes.
Just like people, there are some people you're like, I don't care for Sally, right? She works in my office and she's always got a frowny face and I don't care for her. Don't go sit next to Sally at lunchtime. Like that's these plants have agency. Nature has agency. If you get a creepy feeling when you go near a particular tree, don't go near that tree. It obviously doesn't want to hang out with you.
Right. And it could just not be, it doesn't mean that you stink or you're a bad person. It could just be something that's intrinsic to that plant. It could be
Right.
something that's environmental. If
Right.
you are going to make a flower essence of sunflowers, so you can work with the energy of sunflower, but you don't want to work with the actual plant material, maybe you're allergic.
Mhm.
You can have this association with sunflower. You go to a stand of sunflowers you find on the side of a road and say, hey, I would love to work with you. Would you like to work with me? And the flower says, nope.
Mhm.
And you go to a second flower in the same stand and they're like, yeah, not me. Miss me with that. Somebody else says, oh, yeah, not me. Okay, so you've asked three flowers now. Hey, can I work with you? And they've all said, yeah, no. It doesn't mean that you stink and that you're a bad witch and nobody loves you and you're going to go eat mud. No, it could be environmental. It could be that they're remediating um, radiation. It could be that they're remediating pollutants or heavy metals. Sunflowers do amazing things for remediating environmental disasters, but that doesn't mean that you are a bad person. It just means that this plant has experienced something. They could have sprayed, there's a million things that could have happened to those specific stand of sunflowers that make them not the best plants to work with
Yeah.
magically. And
And
that's
it could be,
okay.
and it could be just right now, right? You might have
Yes,
just caught somebody on a bad day and they don't feel like working with you right now. Maybe they're fucking tired. That's okay.
that's okay.
Right?
Boundaries, boundaries.
Boundaries. But when we're talking about plant magic and people don't realize, like again, bringing the conversation full circle, this is something that's there every day. When you
Yeah.
have the awareness that these things are magical and have agency and want to work with you or not want to work with you, then we go, if I think we have a lot more compassion for our partners in magic, right? Everything we work with magically is something we're working with, not using to do something,
Yes.
right? When we have that point of view, more often than not, natural elements are going to want to work with you, right? If you walk around being open and loving, other things are going to be attracted. People, plants, nature, animals, it's going to be attracted to you because you're putting that out there.
This is a really important lesson for consent.
Yes.
This is the opportunity to practice consent, where someone's, you walk up to a sunflower and they're like, no, man, not a thing. And you take those flowers anyway. Guess what? That's not a healthy magical relationship. That's not going to be a plant that's going to work with you ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And
How
this
do
is
you know? How do you know that, how do you know that yes means yes and no means no, and maybe can mean yes and maybe can mean no, but maybe means no, period? Like in working with plants, how do we not be in our head about it and go, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's just a flower. Like, how do you know?
sit with that flower, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. Um, but you have to give yourself permission to be quiet enough to feel that answer. It might be a lightening of one shoulder and a drooping of another shoulder. It might be a bright sunshine in your chest. It might be a dour feeling in your shoulders. You have to listen to your own body, as well as trying to figure out what those signals mean from which plants, which spirits, which allies, because they're all going to be different languages, because they're not going to just automatically speak English, and that's okay. It might
Right.
be a picture or a feeling in your heart or in your mind. Every one of us speaks a different language and has a different experience, and that's okay. The best way to start is just by closing down the litany in my brain as a neurodivergent person and saying, okay, taking a deep breath. I'm going to put my phone down. I'm just going to sit here for a couple minutes and see what that feels like. In the Fine Torn Garden from the 70s, I found this book at my mother's best friend was also a witch. So I would go and spend the night and we'd go do witchy things together.
Yeah.
So I found the Fine Torn Garden in probably 91 or 92. And so I'm reading this book and they're talking about, hey, we need to plow this section of garden today. So we're going to connect with the spirit of earthworms and say, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to be plowing here when the sun is right overhead.
Right.
So if everybody could be moved out of this section of garden bed by the time the sun is right overhead, that would be super great. We don't want to hurt anybody. And so they went, they came back an hour later when, it was noon, and they're digging around in the dirt and they don't find any worms. But the section they're not plowing is suddenly filled with earthworms. And they're like, okay, we've made that connection. They go
Wow.
and they plow that particular set of field. And it's like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Why did nobody ever think of this?
Right.
So we're actually taking that time to feel that connection in our bodies. The important part is figuring out what those connections feel like.
Mm.
I was doing a class on with an intuition class that was meeting regularly, and we said, okay, we're going to figure out, are you traveling in the next 6 months? That's the only aim for this class, and so we're going to figure out what our bodies are telling us and when. What do those things mean? So each pair of people would go back and forth, and your job as a student who's watching this Zoom is to go through and really figure out what sensations you're feeling, what things that your body is telling you. And so as these things are going, I kept having this sensation of someone grabbing the back of my belt and like pulling down. I'm like, okay, that's a very specific feeling. What does that look like? What does that mean? And as I'm going through and I'm writing, I'm trying, there are all these groups. I'm like, is that south because it's pulling down? Is that what's happening? And so all of those people were in fact going to be traveling south of me. But as I go through the pattern, they're all south of me because they're going on Caribbean cruises. Like they're all going over water. So that subtle pulling on my belt buckle was the travel over water that I was feeling, not just it just happened to be south of me because Delaware is north of where the Caribbean is.
Right. Right.
Um, my
Wow.
partner said, "Okay, am I going anywhere in the next 6 months?" And I got a tingle in the index finger of my right hand. I'm like, okay, what the hell does that mean?
Right.
And then I got a picture of a um, those brown and white state park signs with a Jeep on it,
Yeah.
and and I'm like, okay, that's still I need more information. And they showed me a picture of my friend Lacey. And I'm like, oh, there goes the light bulb. My friend Lacey lives in Michigan. Michigan uses the hand as a map of the state. So going right here means there's a spot in the Upper Peninsula where my friend is going to go in, around Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And I'm like, so you're going right here in November? And she goes, oh my God, my dad has a cabin outside of a state park right in this area.
Wow.
And because I'm not from Michigan, it took that extra step
Right.
of them showing me my friend Lacey's face to say,
Right.
"Oh, duh, that's Michigan. You're going to a
Right.
state park in Michigan in this area."
But it was the listening.
It was the listening
It was the listening. It was the
because
slowing down and listening to your body and what was going on inside and
yes,
any messages that were coming through. And to your point, we can do that by listening to the plants.
yes, every time they're going to speak a different language, so you've got to find somewhere some common ground to meet in the middle.
Wow. That Amy, you're just so incredible. And I could talk to you all day. And unfortunately, I can't because I have to wrap it up. But okay, Amy Blackthorn, the new book is Sacred Plant Magic and is out through Wiser Books. Tell us where we can buy your books, all of your books. Tell us where we can find you online. If we want to buy this for Yule and holiday presents, how do we do that? Tell us all that stuff.
Okay, so this is definitely a wiser book. So anywhere fine books are sold. I really love being able to work with independent bookstores because they are the lifeblood of our magical communities. You can check out the first 30 pages of any of my books for free at amyblackthorn.com. You can book readings there. You can get the opportunity to chat with me over Zoom. Blackthornsbotanicals.com has tea. I would say if you were looking to get something for the holidays, I would order now because I get really busy really
Mhm.
quickly. It takes a good amount of time to get through the backlog of teas while I'm also uh, on a deadline for another book.
Yes, of course. Of course you are.
Two books in 1 week this year was a lot,
Mm.
and I that doesn't mean I can't. Yeah, I can stop writing because the voices won't let me.
Excellent. We'll put all of those links and all of everything in the show notes. So if anybody didn't catch it when you said it, the links will be in the show notes. So go and click and buy and spend time with Amy Blackthorn online. Go to find where she's teaching, find where she's speaking. She's effing amazing, as you can tell. A wealth of knowledge about so many things. Definitely check out Sacred Plant Magic. Amy, thank you so much for being here. You are one of my favorite humans. I am so happy to know you. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and much, much, much gratitude.